What sucks is the truth is not good.
Which means it's even more important to tell the truth.
So you take Jessica, this expert, coming out and being like, we got about 10 years left of this country. Vote for me.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Douglas, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Skippy and Douglas in the place to be. Thank you for tuning in for another riveting episode. I went in my synonyms for that one.
You failed our listeners. You failed our listeners.
Good. Please hit us up, skippydouglas@gmail.com. We love getting your listener mail. And check out skippydouglas.com for everything about the show, including how you get premium subscriptions. It's a great way to support the show if you like the content. You can also just go straight to skippydouglas.supercast.com if you want to do that. Today's episode, we got a few items for you. We're going to start off with some investing advice from CNBC. I'm going to call it what it is. Okay, investing advice from CNBC. Then we're going to discuss this recent Freakonomics episode, which is a replay from about a year ago with some updates on tax policy. Hit on sports, specifically in Wisconsin and college sports, and then wrap it up with a recap of a recent Invest Like the Best episode. I'm already worn out. We haven't even started yet. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, so this week we want to put a time capsule on this week with a 12-second video clip. Here you go.
Let's do it.
This deadline that President Trump has set, 8 p.m., has threatened to destroy a civilization. How does an investor process that? Is it a bigger upside risk or downside risk?
I mean, what can you do but laugh? This speaks to, one, how crazy the week is. Two, that maybe we don't need like 5 24-hour investing TV channels. I mean, there's literally nothing to talk about.
On that point, I realized this has been true as of late, but especially this week. So I subscribe to, I don't know what it is. Let's call it like 4 or 5 different investing newsletters that come my way. I look at all sorts of things. Anyway, a lot of content. And this week in particular, I noticed that nearly nothing in any of those were about investing, like directly. Like it was so occupied by nearly anything else, not even just politics. There was like random stuff in there, like a cat like in a tree. It was just like, I was like, where? It's such a weird time right now.
I think there's a valuable lesson in even though our show is about investing and we frequently talk about investing, there's not something to talk about every week. Like you don't have to make a trade every week. You shouldn't make a buy or sell every week. In most cases, you don't have to make a buy or sell every year, right? And so it's funny how where all the algorithms reward content, people are designed to put out content even when there's not anything to talk about. I mean, on the investing front, you can speculate about war stuff or other stuff, but there's really nothing to do.
This one, to go back to this clip in particular, it's mind-blowing to me. Because with a straight face, I mean, she says this with a straight face. There is literally, from the most powerful human being on the planet, put out a True Social that says that he will wipe out a civilization. And what happens on CNBC is they go, upside risk, downside risk.
I know, it's
wipe out civilization. What is the upside?
I don't know how news anchors, I don't know like what their yearly review looks like, right? Or if they, debrief at the end of each week about what they did well and what they did poorly. Yeah. But if that person's producer, manager, whatever, it's not being like, let's talk about Tuesday. You think you could have handled that a little better? Yeah. I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, this is like prime. At the end of her day, Lumbergh shows up with his coffee cup. It's like, yeah. Oh, my goodness. All right. Should we jump into tax policy, reach into the real fishbowl?
Tax policy, I swear it's good. So we just talked about, you don't have to talk about investing every week. What I want to talk about with this Freakonomics episode about tax myths is like much larger dynamics of what's happened to tax policy in the last 20 plus years. 2 of the just flat out lies that are being told. And then I have a hypothetical for you that the episode didn't even go to, but I'm really curious to get your thoughts on.
Secrets. Okay. I love this.
So, Freakonomics episode on tax myths, originally recorded last year, updated for this year after the big beautiful bill. I mean, whatever. If the name's true, I'm not so convinced. But first is just there's 10 tax myths. I only want to touch on 2 of them. The main two are that both parties lie to you massively over and over again. According to this tax expert, I would co-sign on this. Republicans will say something along the lines of tax cuts are great, tax cuts are wonderful, tax cuts will force the government to spend less money because we'll take in less revenue and then we'll balance the budget. Anyone with a brain that's been around for the past 20, 30 years knows that isn't happening. It's not true. The Democrat side say something along the lines of, well, we'll increase the social safety net and we'll do it for free. And the way that's often packaged is we'll have rich people pay for it or we'll have corporations pay for it. Yep. There's this a really alarming stat in the episode that if you define so-called rich people as people that make more than $500,000 a year, yep, and you confiscate all their assets, all their wealth. So you take the richest people in the country, you take 100% every single penny they own, you put that in the government's bank account. You can run the U.S. government for like 8 months, and then you're done, right?
Yeah.
The solution is not, and this is really complicated stuff, but that simple example should give you the idea that you don't get free stuff, right? This is just, go ahead.
And I also loved in the episode when they said this, rightfully, they also said, and guess what? The stock market is now crashed because they sold all of their assets. Like it's...
And half all the companies are bankrupt because they own the companies.
Exactly. And you get 8 months out of it. Yeah, I thought
so.
That was
you sacrifice so much future tax revenue down the line. There's a bunch of other issues if you're potentially interested in this. There are a bunch of other facts about how the U.S. tax system compares to the European tax system, what's actually progressive, who pays the majority of tax. It is wealthier folks by a large percentage. The expert argues that the middle class actually is probably the most undertaxed middle class in the developed world, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to do more reading before I conclude that, but felt like the episode was fair and balanced and just really interesting if you find this interesting. Douglas, there's 2 hypothetical places I want to go.
Hold on, before you go there.
Yeah.
Before you go there, a couple other points. So I'm probably going to get the name wrong, but I believe the expert's name is Jessica Riedel, something like that along those lines.
Yeah.
And what I thought was fascinating was she was explicitly, unapologetically Republican conservative, like very much so, and has no qualms with ripping everybody apart. This person, you said expert a few times, and the reason I think the reading that you mentioned is definitely worthwhile doing, but what made me believe her the most was she was like, I just go to facts. Like, I believe my beliefs, but then, like, I've got my ideology, but then I just go to the facts. And it's just laying out facts, right, which we should always check the facts that come out. But I thought that was really interesting. The other thing before you go to hypotheticals that caught my attention was around Social Security. I hadn't thought about it in this way, but what she said was the primary reason that we are in such a big deficit with regard to Social Security is that the first Social Security folks did not pay into it, and they only collected. And so that started this snowball of debt with regard to Social Security. And I just had not, it makes perfect sense. Like, it's very logical. I just had not thought about that. And I don't know what to do with it exactly. You just like skip a generation or something like that. You just go, everyone born in the next 20 years does not get Social Security, and then we're back on track. But it was just a very like logical, interesting tidbit that came out of that episode.
Oh, so first, the reason the episode carried weight with me is because it's throwing truth bombs at all sides of the aisle. Yeah. There was credibility in that.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's also credibility in saying, this is what so-and-so told you, this is what they actually did. It's the exact opposite. And that's happening on both sides of the aisle, and it's been happening on both sides of the aisle for 30 years. Yep. Your last point is one of my hypotheticals. That's where I want to go.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
Social Security is fascinating. It needs to be reined in because there's simply not money. There's all sorts of challenges with it. But people think of Social Security as, so use my parents' generation. They think, oh, I worked for 40 years. I put money in this federal bank, and I had my own little carved out personal bank account, and they just held my funds, and then they're just giving it back to me. That's not at all how it works. The folks that are retired today are typically getting 3 times as much money as they put in to the system. And that's before you talk about the generation that never put money in, they got money out, right?
Yep.
And then you talk about population dynamics and everything else. Those are the facts. That's one. The hypothetical I want to go with this is I heard an argument within the past 6 months that I've been noodling on. And it's basically that what was the American dream, what made America the most ambitious country in the world, maybe 50 or 100 years ago, is that people that came to America had no promises, had no guarantees. There was no, and you can retire well.
Yeah.
There's a place out there that's going to value freedom and safety. That's about it. And you get to choose and build your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
This happens to all developed nations, and it's really tough. And it's happened 1,000 times before in other civilizations. But now we're at a point where the people in power, the people that control the votes, are the ones who are saying, no, give me 3 times as much money as I put in.
Yeah.
No, don't build new housing. Like, I like my house. I don't want someone else to be able to afford a house near me. Do you know how nice my neighborhood is? That's hyperbolic. I'm not talking about me, but et cetera, et cetera. So it's become a place where, there's still a lot of opportunity. It still might be the best place to build a business and generate wealth that there is in the world. But we've put all these handcuffs on that, and it's showing up in our government balance sheet in a way that's unavoidable. And I think needs to be corrected, but man, is it a tough challenge to correct, because you have hundreds of millions of people, maybe at least 100 million people, that are automatically going to say, no, we can't do that.
Yep.
I feel like I was promised that.
There are 2 things that come to mind that are analogous. One is, I've been in the startup world mostly. And there is an analogy in that world, too, that I've seen over several companies of what happens is, because I usually come in pretty early to these companies when there's just not a lot going on. You have a PowerPoint presentation, a hope, a dream, and a prayer, maybe a customer or something. And at that point, people are just all in it. You'll kind of do anything to survive. It is about survival. Get whatever you can. There's money over there. Go try and get that customer. You're incredibly creative. All that comes out. And then there comes the point later when the organization's more established. Doesn't even have to be, I'm not talking big or public or anything, just more established. And understandably, at that point, you can bring people in that didn't want the risk initially. I'm not blaming anybody, right? You'd bring that didn't want the risk. That's not what they signed up for. And even the folks that have been around, you start to get a bit more comfortable. And you start to get to that place where it's how do I protect my fiefdom? How do we not lose the revenue that we already have? How do we, it's all, again, it's logical and understandable, but similar analogy. The other one, this one's a little bit more out there, not as straightforward. But it's based on a conversation I was having recently. So I was talking to my wife recently, and we were discussing the anxiety that exists among parents today. And especially in the types of, I'd say middle class and above, I'd say, right? The types of anxieties. And it's are my kids doing the right activities? How do I juggle these schedules? How do I, all this other stuff? And one of the things that it got me thinking about was the anxieties that we don't have. What the things that our parents used to worry about, when you don't have to worry about those things, is there going to be food on the table? Can we pay rent? How do I keep this job? Those kinds of things, when you don't have those, humans are naturally inclined for improvement, which is a great thing for us. But the baseline of what that improvement comes from dictates our mentality toward what we have. And I think that there is something, it goes back to the Comfort Crisis book that was published in the last few years too. There is something to it.
Yeah, good book.
I don't know how you instill authentic scarcity when it doesn't necessarily exist.
It's funny. Morgan Housel basically wrote about this week. He wrote about feeling like his kids were spoiled, and then tried to reframe it into, well, it's wonderful that they don't have that they're food secure and housing secure, and like the things that the previous generation built that we now take for granted lead to new challenges, which create a comfort crisis. I think it's a pretty good piece. I hear you. I agree. Yeah. It's interesting.
It's like the movie The Purge. Have you watched that? I don't know if you're in those kinds of movies.
No.
Are you familiar with the concept of it?
No, tell me.
Okay. So I can't remember all the details, so just take this directionally. But basically what happens is that society has become overpopulated. And so every now and again, what happens is there's like this 24-hour period. I think it's a 24-hour period where the government comes out and says, for the next 24 hours, murder is legal. And it just creates, there's just complete chaos, right, for 24 hours. And then everything goes back to society. Mm-hmm. That's the way it operates. I was just thinking about that, but which is obviously a ridiculous premise. But thinking about that, it's like, actually, you just completely reshuffle the economics of the country for some period of time. It's like, you have a house today, there's a lottery, and we pull out of the lottery, and now we take all of your assets and transfer them to a completely different set of people. And there's like this recycling of people experiencing other parts of the economy, I suppose, or something.
A system like that would force those who are making new laws to be more fair, because you would never know what part of the lottery you would end up in the next time the reshuffling happens, right? There's less reshuffling. And of course there's less reshuffling if the benefits for people who are 55 and up are generous, right? Yeah. Like once you reach the perch, there's nothing that's going to knock you off the perch. Mm-hmm. You're in good shape.
Exactly. I'll give one last completely off-topic thing. But it's related to the last off-topic thing. So someone recommended this other movie to me called The Platform. Have you watched that one? Okay. So it's a similar premise, except if you go to jail, like there's a certain type of jail they have it's all these floors. It's like a couple hundred floors or something like that. And the way that this works is there's a platform in the middle that has a plethora of food, just food galore on it. And it lowers down. It starts on floor 1 and goes down to all the floors, right? And so as you can imagine, if you're on the lower floors, there's very little that's left for you. But what's tricky here is every now and again, it's like every few weeks or something, I can't remember the time period, but every now and again, when you go to sleep, they inject you with a drug and change your floor. And so like it's a very similar thing. So you could be like feasting like a king one day, and then you're on floor 200 the next day. And what that does psychologically to people, it's a pretty interesting show. Okay. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled program.
We're back to tax myths. We got distracted with movies, which I love. All right. The last thing is, there's a overarching theme that Congress members, like many on Capitol Hill, fully understand these dynamics and will not mention, like, are working on cuts to Social Security. But it's all top secret, because if anything leaks that Senator or Congressperson X might cut entitlements, their chance of re-election are gone. It's just incredibly broken. Here's the headlining. This has been true. This will continue to be true. Historically, you look past the last 100 years, and U.S. tax receipts, like basically U.S. government revenue, is somewhere between 17 to 20% of GDP. Yep. Spending is somewhere between 17, in normal times, somewhere between 17 and 23% of GDP. Okay? And do you remember the Ross Perot thing from 30 years ago, where he had like a few billboards and he bought a half an hour of television?
Yeah.
I am begging for someone. I'm obviously never running for office because I think it's the worst job in the world. I am begging for someone to buy 30 minutes of TV, whether you're a presidential candidate or whatever, and outline the simple fact that let's call it 18 and a half. Let's pick a number in the middle. We need to bring in 18.5% of GDP. That needs to come in the door. We need to have roughly 18.5% of GDP go out the door. With that simple fact, You can do whatever you want with tax code. You could simplify it. So there's an 18.5% charge on every GDP type activity.
Yep.
And get rid of personal income tax and you could do 1,000 things. But that is the simple, like, the equation that actually has to work is we need 18.5% coming in. We need roughly that going out. It can go higher in times of war or times of crisis.
Yep.
It better go lower when it's not. We're on the path to 33% of GDP as a spending target 10 years out. Like,
yeah,
this is
ludicrous.
Not hard. It's not hard at all. We need someone to be actually. So the reason I mentioned the Ross Perot thing is it is my belief, and maybe I'm an idiot, that if leaders actually tell the truth based in fact,
where are you going with this?
People would support it. People would actually elect someone that Do you think the majority of Americans don't realize that both parties are actively lying to their face, even if they've been lying to their face for 30 years?
Well, so I think that there's evidence for what you just said, although it's ironic evidence. I believe that many, many people voted for Donald Trump because the perception was he was telling them the truth. Like, he was the one not from the swamp of DC. He was the outsider coming in that was revealing truths to people. I think that was what motivated the vote. I'll make it non-political by saying independent of whether or not it was the truth. I do think that was the perception. So I think that defends your point around people wanting to hear the truth. The question that I have around it, though, is do they actually want to hear the real truth?
No,
right?
I want to jump in. What often happens is people vote for the opposite of what's currently in power. So I'm not even going to use names, right?
Yeah.
There's a Democrat in power. People get worn out. They vote for a Republican. People get worn out. They vote for a Democrat. What I'm saying is people are going to be worn out. That's just the nature of living with someone making headlines for 4 years. You're going to be worn out with that person and probably that party. But if there's a third choice, and it could come from within either of the parties, but if there's a choice where you can still be worn out and vote for something different, but have that person actually tell you the truth, what I'm saying is you often have two options of folks that are effectively lying to you. And if one of those options was telling you the truth, I think folks in D.C. really underestimate how powerful that could be. I just do.
Yeah, what sucks is the truth is not good.
Which means it's even more important to tell the truth.
I understand, but when you take Jessica, this expert, coming out and being like, we got about 10 years left of this country. Vote for me. Anyway.
I mean, the listeners know I hate politics, so we'll leave it there. Trying to be very down the center as we talk about this, but the tax policy myth episode was fascinating. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, very much so.
Speaking of, tax policy and crazy politicians, the state of Wisconsin, the governor signed a bill that provides almost $15 million in state funding for the University of Wisconsin. For what? For libraries, Douglas? You think libraries? For student welfare? For healthcare? What do you think? Basically for the football team. Now, I am going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I have been arguing. To my knowledge, I'm the first person to argue this, specifically for the state of Wyoming. The state of Wyoming has a Division I football team, a Division I basketball team, roughly 500,000 residents.
Yep.
A fair amount of oil money. It's a resource-rich state. Believe they don't even have state taxes. I have argued that in the NIL era, the state of Wyoming should have long ago said, we're going to give some huge number, like $100 million to University of Wyoming athletics because it's the only game in town. And the University of Wyoming should be winning national titles in basketball and football and everything else, because you can very easily put these athletes on a billboard in the state and it would change the dynamics of that economy.
Absolutely.
And you have the money, right? So I have been arguing that in certain places this makes a ton of sense. Wisconsin's borderline. I understand what they're trying to do. I totally get the ROI that they think comes with this investment. But Wisconsin has a pro football team in the Packers, a pro basketball team in the Bucs. Like, it's not like Wisconsin is the only game in town. And to my knowledge, Wisconsin does not have a state budget surplus. So I hope that makes sense. I fully support the idea in the right circumstance. I would push back. Here's the sad thing. Everyone else is going to do this now. And so we've effectively said that taxpayers should pay college football teams because the state of Louisiana will spend money on LSU football over a library any day. They've done it for 100 years. It's true. State of Mississippi does this. State of Mississippi has changed laws, so NIL is not taxed.
Should we pull up the cloud usage again by state and see which?
Stop it. Anyway, there's my rant. I don't know. You have a take on this?
I think it's the Wild West right now with NIL, and I'm fascinated to see what happens. I think running experiments in this, even though they're not going to be treated exactly like experiments, but as an outsider, as someone that's not paying taxes in Wisconsin, I'm like all for it. If this happens in Colorado, I might have a different view, and so then we can approach it there. But I will NIMBY the crap out of this, watching Wisconsin and seeing what happens.
Yeah,
I'm all for them trying.
Okay, last thing on sports, I'm going to squeeze in. There's a NBA tanking issue, which I know you all know. The worst but the funniest proposal I've heard is that the league should mandate beer prices based on win-loss records. The way this works, Jiggles, is at the start of the year, every beer is priced at $10. And then for every win the team has, it increases by 35 cents. And for every loss, it decreases by 20 cents. First of all, I'd make those equal. I'd make it like a quarter each way, right?
Yep.
But if this was in place today, let me give you some of the current beer prices across the league. The Oklahoma City Thunder would have a $23 beer. Seems a little much. A team like the Cleveland Cavaliers would have a $15 beer. And then the Washington Wizards, who are currently 17-61, just making sure I read this right, the beer would be negative 10 cents, meaning the Wizards would you'd walk up, you'd shove your ID, they'd give you a beer and a dime. Like, we need a little fun. We've talked about all the challenges with sports, whether it's private equity or we need a little fun. They need to do some things like this. It'd be hilarious. And listen, I was at games within the past 30 years of the worst team in the league, right? And there was a time where I was up in the third row and the general manager from the team was walking around shaking hands because there were so few fans in the arena that he felt like he could say hi to everyone. At that point, you should give him a free beer. Like, you just should. So,
But you're saying as a team, you're like, okay, so now we're losing money on ticket sales and we're losing money on concessions.
Yeah, you better find a way to win more than 17 games. I mean, incentives matter, right? And again, this is a joke, but there should be more. It should be painful to lose that much. And right now it's not, because you get the reward potentially of a number one pick, which the economic value of a number one pick is somewhere around $100 million, right? So
I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah, I've seen some analysis. I can dig it up for you.
I'm sure you have.
Reach into your fishbowl and stop talking trash about my proposal.
I think that's fun. A less fun thing, but I feel like we got to figure this out because it's aggravating, is ticket prices are set based on the two teams that are playing, okay? And the players that are on those teams and you wanting to see those players. When one shows up to a game and none of those players play, it is so aggravating. I went to the Nuggets Thunder game, and literally 0 starters hit the floor from either team.
The 10 best players did not play
at all. Not only did not play, were in like street clothes. Like there was no chance they were going to play. And this is the most expensive ticket that I've purchased for the Nuggets this year because you get to see the players that you get to see. And I'm like, I don't even know who this dude is.
How long ago did you purchase the tickets?
Fall. So it wasn't even close to, right?
Yeah, that's really outrageous. I mean, let's just continue on this. I was super excited about the World Cup in the U.S. based on ticket prices, it looks like I will not be attending the game.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm on the wait list. Should be next week for Olympics in LA. Based on availability of events and ticket prices, it looks like I will not be attending. I'm a fairly crazy sports fan, as are you with certain sports, and it's like just I'm getting to apathy levels with a lot of this stuff. It's possible I'm the only one, but
you're not. Well, but there's at least two on this podcast.
There's I was in New York City last month, paid like $200 to get into Madison Square Garden. It was expensive, but it was great. Yeah. Right? Yeah. When the soccer tickets are going for $700 or something, it's just it's like the opportunity costs are so great. And then you talk about travel and hotels and everything else.
I mean, I probably even said this in the pod, but love the game of soccer. And for years now, similar to what you just said with the World Cup, I was so extreme to the point where I said, what I want to do, I know this is wild, but I was talking to my wife about it. I go, I want to go to a game in every city. Like that is what I want to do.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. It's like across Canada, across the US, just, I could stay with people, but whatever. I was like, that would be so much fun to see what the vibes are like. I've purchased 0 tickets. Like it's gone from extreme on one side to, I'm like, it's so ridiculous that, okay, we don't need to.
No, I'm with you. I don't think people actually realize I've planned like multinational trips with hotels, flights, and everything for less than it would cost for me to go to like a soccer game in LA. It's just outrageous.
It's wild.
All right, let's shift gears and go to this Invest Like the Best episode.
All right, so there was an Invest Like the Best episode recently. And so Patrick O'Shaughnessy interviews Alex Waxman. They talk about private credit, the history of financial systems, all kinds of things. We'll hit on a few points. So one thing, he talks about the idea of the factory model, which I will summarize as things have shifted from, I might be too generous in what it used to be. Where things are now is that the way that these funds operate is raise as much money as possible and then deploy it as quickly as possible. And that's the factory. Bring as much money in, just deploy it out. And the incentives that push on that are you get paid by the amount of assets that you have under management. And so you're just collecting fees. And that then means, and we'll talk about the implications for investors, but that then means that it's not so much about the returns that you are providing for what hits your bank account. It's about how big of a business you can make, what your assets under management are. And that's the factory. Get as much money as possible, deploy it. That's one of the elements I want to talk about.
I mean, I'm wondering, we can skip it, but there's also a whole history of how the investing in banking markets have evolved since basically 1930. I guess I'll just plant that seed. If you're curious in that is an important foundation to understand how we got where we are today and why direct lending and private credit matters today. I'll just say the Howard Marks most recent memo that came out this week. One, I wondered if he was in bad health because on the podcast, he has an AI reader that tries to impersonate him. But two, the memo's really good. And he breaks down how we got where we got today and his concerns. And you can just make money listening to Howard is all I would say. Yeah, so anyway, keep going on.
Yeah.
Alan.
So then if you take so that's just a little bit of context for where we are, which probably does not surprise a lot of people, but the factory model was a new term for me. Then he talks about the implications for investors. And we've talked about the private capital markets here, private credit. One of the phrases or sentences that he says that I think is pure gold is there's no such thing as semi-liquid. And the reason,
true. Yeah,
which is just true, but it's what's trying to be sold out there. The reason he brings this up is because if you look at illiquid investments mixed with redeemable capital, like last week we were talking about how there were caps on withdrawals, but people want to take their money out. But if you are an organization that is yourself investing in illiquid assets and people are taking out their capital, that is by definition an unstable situation. Because just to put it out, to make it obvious, it's like the equivalent of if you have fixed costs, but you have revenue that's fluctuating, it can become a problem if your revenue goes down too far, but your costs are fixed, right? You can think about it as a personal thing.
Yes.
You can think about it in the same way. If you have bad times, everything could be great in good times, but if you have bad times, your assets and liabilities will not match up, and that is a problem.
Well, and everyone's bound to have bad times and turbulent times.
That's
just the nature of things. So I want to re-say some of the things you've said, but just to make it's not the most easy to comprehend concept, I think, for people outside of wealth management. If you have the idealistic view that maybe 50 years ago, if you found a great opportunity for your investors, you went and raised $50 million because you saw a $50 million opportunity.
Yep.
So it didn't matter if people showed up with checks for $100 million. You said, no, what I need for this is $50 million. So you get your $50 million, you deploy your $50 million, you make sure those investors understand the risk, understand the liquidity options for them, and you make great returns on that $50 million. The reason the capital market history and what he calls System 1, System 2, System 3 is important is because it sets a stage for, in a low interest rate environment like we've been in, all of a sudden the size of these checks, the size of checks people were willing to write, endowments and other people, to the person that, in my example, needed $50 million to deploy, they increased because they were looking for yield. And they were looking for yield in private equity, private credit, because for the longest time, because that was a relatively niche business, that was a place where there were potentially outsized returns, right?
Yep.
Now, that same dynamic happens. The person needs 50 million, maybe 100 million, but a $500 million checks show up on their door, and they just do the math in the back of their head, and they go, well, I get paid 10 times more if I do that.
Yep.
I don't really know where I'm going to deploy $500 million, but I'll find a way. Like, this is great. I get the yacht that way, or I get the bigger apartment, or I get more time hanging out in Japan with my friends. I don't know why I make up such random examples, but you get the point. And so they take the extra capital. To deploy that extra capital, they have to find new opportunities. In order to find more opportunities, they have to relax their standards.
Exactly.
And what you get is it's like too many jugglers chasing too few goods. It's the reverse of that. Well, it's actually
the same thing.
Investing realm.
Yeah. Except the cost goes to the investor.
Yes.
It's right. Exact same thing.
So I thought this was really fun. This is the reason why the private investing world can be hard if you're managing the fund and you're not solely in it for what does my paycheck look like, right? Because if you're in it truly based on risk-adjusted returns, at some point in certain environments, you have to say no when people are trying to give you hundreds of millions of dollars. You actually have to do that. And also, when when billions of dollars flood your area of expertise where you've made great returns for 20 years, you probably have to look to another pocket of the market to make great returns in the future. But it almost goes back to our Social Security conversation. Why would you do that when this massive paycheck is showing up at your door, and you could hire 30 more people for your firm, and you could do all these other things, and you could have the prestige of having $1 billion fund instead of a $100 million fund?
And a reason outside of just morality, a reason why you do it is because of long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. But in the case where the short-term thinking can get you personally, the outcome that you could get in the long term, but immediately, I mean, that's where, because it's very different if you take short-term and long-term thinking and you go, okay, this is going to screw me over in the next 5 years, and it's not worth it because the gain I get. But when it screws you over the next 5 years and it's fully worth it financially, that's really hard.
Completely.
You're like, I can take the 50 million, and over the next 3 decades, I'm making up numbers, but over the next 3 decades, I'm going to make $50 million. Or you go, or I take the 500 million, actually I make $50 million tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. So like the downside risk.
Like there's a higher probability that my investors are worse off. But like, again, think about it from an individual's perspective who's had great success in this area for 20 years. You tend to think that that's skill more than luck. You know, you weren't in the right place at the right time, levered up in a low interest rate environment when it was a great time to own private capital or private equity. So I didn't love the end of this episode, but like the first 30 minutes or so, there were a few times where I had to rewind, a few times where I had to like actually focus, deeply listen, because there's a lot going on with the description of how we got where we got today. And if you want to dive into that, I think it's fascinating because there's a reason everyone is talking about private credit right now. There's a reason that KKR and Apollo stocks are down 40%, that Blue Owl's stock is down 70%. This will be a headline of 2026, 2027. I think we're far enough down the road that that's just a fact at this point.
But the reason, this will surprise you, the reason that Blue Owl stock is down 70% is not what you think. It's because they don't have enough information to realize that it should be down 100%.
You've apparently done more research than I have.
Is that a wrap?
Oh, that's a wrap. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hit us at skippydougals.com for more information on the show. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, everybody.